Welcome to Every Horror Movie on Netflix, the show where we watch, review, and discuss every horror movie on Netflix. Again, I'm Chris, here with Patrick.
Hello.
Elizabeth.
Hello.
And Steven.
Hi.
And on today's show, a monstrosity of a man sits in a dim room with filthy clothes, surviving on fast food, glued to a screen. But enough about my weekend. We're here to talk about 13 cameras.
Jesus Christ.
Grown.
I'm working on this. So, 13 cameras. It's at the beginning of the alphabet. We're in the numbers now. We've moved on from the special characters.
Oh, that's right. It's a milestone.
It's a milestone. I'll drink to that. And what are we drinking, Elizabeth?
Well, I just made some spicy margs for everyone. Margaritas, for those of you who don't know what a marg is. I think so far, I don't know what the reviews are on these. View it, cue it, or screw it. I know we have one screw it because Patrick thinks they are too spicy. But we'll see what happens.
I say view it, but with less spice next time.
Okay. Well, anyway, we're drinking spicy margs.
View it with prejudice, I would say.
View it with prejudice.
I would say cue it. I think it's pretty good.
Okay.
I think we got a lot of chili powder on the rim. I guess that's what you do with a marg. You season it on the rim. The drink itself is a typical kind of marg. It's got a cucumber in it, which I like because it's anti-inflammatory.
All right. Well, drinking some margs. 13 cameras.
13 goddamn cameras.
Well, we'll get into how many cameras are actually in this movie. I think that's worth discussing. Anybody want to describe this movie briefly before we get into it?
This one's more simple than...
This is the simplest movie we've ever watched. A young couple rents a home and does not realize that there are cameras in the home that the landlord is watching their life through.
That's basically
the story.
That's the story.
It.
And the landlord, we meet him early on. He's gross, disgusting, movie monster of a man, Frankenstein monster kind of guy.
Mm-hmm.
He's kind of like Peter Stormare meets John Goodman meets Sling Blade is sort of what I felt about him. He's a very disgusting person. He has the typical sort of like pervert creep glasses, except these seem to be custom made for the film. They're almost steampunk. He has a very striking
very
presence.
Reflective, too.
Octagonal or something.
Octagonal.
Yeah.
Well, this guy, he is great for the role. He's this creepy landlord who watches people on camera and basically gets what he's hoping for is naked ladies. And when he gets them, he just grunts in a pretty creepy way, and he does it really well. I mean, it's not everybody who can grunt in that manner, and I think he nails it.
A masturbatory way.
And it's unclear at many times whether or not he's actually masturbating or if he just has such a visceral, hands-free reaction to seeing women on camera. I think later in the film, he does finally pull out some tissues. But
no, he starts to unbuckle his belt. Like, it's implied that he's going to masturbate, but the film is too, it's too genteel to show us that sort of thing. It's a refined... This is N film, for sure.
Well, why don't we back up and start where the movie begins? This is very much an exploitation film, I think. It's cashing in on the technological craze of miniature surveillance cameras. The movie sets out to make you, the viewer, afraid that you might be watched. And it gives these phony statistics about how 18,000 people a year are surveilled in their homes without their knowledge.
Are those phony statistics? Do we know?
Well, they're not attributed to
These
anything,
are the statistics. So. Let's try and consider these. I actually made notes of these when they popped up on screen because the movie literally begins with these two titles. 30 million surveillance cameras have been sold. That's just kind of a general statistic thrown out there, I guess.
Fine.
In like
check Consumer Reports,
the
but sounds legit.
Of man. 8,000 people were watched without their knowledge last year. What's last year? Probably like 2015 in the
this came out in 2016.
Okay.
Yeah. I don't know. Does that sound... I mean, who knows how many people were watched?
Well, it's not so far-fetched that we're like, fuck no, that's impossible.
I have no frame of reference, but I just find it amusing when a movie uses this sort of tactic. Like, that's immediately going to instill fear in me. I think it's an effort to make up for sort of a lack of skill in the acting, writing, and directing departments that they feel like they're trying to scare you before the movie even begins.
It's like an after-school special. It's like a technological parable. Like, this is what could happen because of modern technology,
Sure.
Yeah, it's trying to make you think it's a topical film.
Yes.
And maybe they were fundraising on that promise, but I don't know. It's directed by some Russian guy, or I don't know if he's actually from Russia. He has a Russian name, and I think he's from Europe. Do we know anything about that?
I know nothing. It was a first feature. I know that.
Yeah, so it's a directorial debut. It's got that going for it. So who are our protagonists? We'll use that
literally
term loosely.
The world's biggest garbage human. Like the husband in this film is the world's biggest garbage human. He has a pregnant wife, and just from moment one, I mean, he's cheating on his wife with his hot assistant.
Another movie with an assistant.
An assistant, yeah. Do we ever... I was puzzled. Maybe someone else... Maybe I missed this. What does this guy do?
I think he works for some kind of cellular company or like internet
Imagine him as
company.
the like manager of a Verizon store.
Who like should not need a quote unquote assistant. It seemed completely bizarre to me that he had a quote unquote assistant to begin with.
Yeah, that was
like,
I mean, you know what? That's fine.
It's not the point, but it still struck me as bizarre.
See, I thought that the characters in this movie were like normal people.
I don't know. I thought everyone was very... Well, we can get into that.
I mean, no one was admirable.
We're talking about our protagonists.
There's no one admirable in this movie. But it was pretty much just like, yeah, here's a movie about some shitty people that you might meet in real life.
I mean, emphasis on shitty, because I thought at least the husband was just a terrible person. And also, he didn't make any sense to me. Like, just... He didn't look like a guy who would have an assistant, and there was
totally
nothing
miscast. I mean, even
nothing
physically.
Scripted. Yeah.
So yeah, we basically
to make
got
that plausible.
We got a young couple, and he's like the poor man's Lee Wannell, if I can use that.
I don't
Please
think
do,
anyone
but
has ever
explain.
said
Yeah,
that
what does
before.
that mean?
He's horror fans will know him as the kid who was chained up in the bathroom in Saw, who's gone on to play the paranormal investigator in 2 of the 3 Insidious movies.
Apparently, I'm not a horror fan.
Anyway, well, the horror fans will eat that one up. I don't know if I pronounced his name right, though. And she, I don't know, maybe she's the poor man's Rachel McAdams or something.
Wait, so you're saying he looks like Lee Wannell?
Yeah, he does. He's kind of got the, like, scruffy millennial kind of vibe.
Yeah.
And she is very pregnant, and that's how you would describe her character.
She's the type of pregnant woman in a movie who is like constantly caressing the bottom of her belly.
We know
to
she's
remind you
pregnant.
that she has a baby.
Well, the movie also has there are some interesting touches. The only one I remember, though, I'm sure I at one point wrote down a couple of ones. There's lots of like imagery in the film that reminds you that she's pregnant. There's like this sort of umbilical cord in the pool that she's always sitting by when she talks to her mom.
Oh,
Do you know
think
what I'm talking about?
You think they aspired that far?
Why else would it be there? I mean, it's clearly meant to be
Okay.
symbolic.
Isn't it just
It's
like
not
a filter
effective.
or something in the bottom?
It's
of the
like part of the pump, but like the fact that they left it in there, it seemed to
Hmm.
be a choice, and I agreed
Okay.
when I saw it.
That's fine.
Well,
But, yeah.
I think that, I mean, whatever, they're just like kind of shitty normal people, honestly. Like, yeah, they're shitty, but a lot of people have affairs. This dude is having an affair with his quote-unquote secretary. That happens all the time. She's like a pregnant stay-at-home person who is always like busy, which is kind of a joke of the movie because he's always like, what are you doing today? And she's like, oh, I have hot yoga and then lunch with Angela. And like she's like, I'm
And then
gonna
the
be,
book club.
Yeah, and she's like, I'm gonna be exhausted by the time you get home. But I mean, like, I think there's a lot of ladies out there like that, you know. And then the other sort of, I mean, besides the landlord, the other main character is this like hot assistant who is just kind of like an assistant who's really into a dude who happens to be the husband and is kind of obsessed with him, which like that happens all the time too. I mean, these are like pretty standard characters.
I was fascinated. She's the world's busiest pregnant woman. At one point, she's like, "Oh, I've got my mommy potluck until 10:30 tonight."
I couldn't
See,
believe
that's
that.
so-
I mean,
that's
this is all
normal.
set up so he has time to cheat on her in their home, and I
Yeah.
just could not believe how active this woman was, even for a non-pregnant woman. I mean, she's got
Agree.
something going on every night.
And mostly she's busy telling us that she's pregnant. Because that's how we know she's pregnant, because through the first 20 minutes of the movie, literally every scene she's in, she's like, I just can't wait for the little guy to get here.
Well, that
Yeah, but
brings me
that's
something
how
that I was
most-
going to bring up later, but I want us to keep this in mind while we're talking about this movie. I don't often do this with films because it's become a trope that I tend to find kind of annoying, but does this movie pass the Bechdel test?
No.
No?
There is that one scene.
What
Unless,
scene?
talking about a unborn baby.
Yes, and who turns out to be a male.
Does it? I don't know.
She talks to her mom on the phone at one point, and the only time she mostly talks about her husband, but then she mentions the kid, and that's the end of the conversation. And arguably, they're talking about a man.
Wait, but we talked over Elizabeth. What? You said that? Are you saying that's how most
pass the Bechdel test?
Yeah, this podcast is not. Are you saying that's how most pregnant women are? I think was your point,
I just think
right?
that like we're talking the main characters in the movie. These are just normal people, and you know, you guys are like, oh my god, she acts so pregnant. Like that's how like a lot of pregnant ladies that I see at work are.
Yeah,
all
that's
the
true.
time.
People will have pregnant, and they want the world to know. And like, mommy and me potlucks are real, and like that's all real. And you know, men have affairs with their secretaries all the time.
Well, the reason I bring up
the true
Bechdel
horror
test,
of this movie to
like,
me. Then
the true horror is that everyone in this movie is a real person.
Is real.
It's a documentary.
Well, the reason I thought to bring that up, because otherwise it seems ridiculous. I mean, we can't hold every movie to that standard. But I was really offended by the way the wife was portrayed in this film. I mean, she was so oblivious and clueless throughout the entire thing. There were so many clues, so many opportunities she had to wake up to the fact that her husband is cheating on her, and that he is just plain awful to her in literally every scene. And it takes probably 2/3 of the runtime for her to even begin to wake up and realize that she's being mistreated. I just felt like that was a really uncharitably written character.
Well, not only that, I think that the writer/director of this film sympathized more with the male cheater and thought we would too.
Yes.
That's what happens in Russia, dude.
Could be.
Yeah, I agree with that, though. I don't know. I just reacted so viscerally to that character. He just seemed so terrible, and I don't know if that was what was intended.
I think it was. We'll get to it when we discuss the final act of the film. We're not supposed to like him. I think we are supposed to sympathize with the wife, and I found it difficult to do so as the film went on. I found myself more frustrated by her lack of awareness and attention to detail in her own life.
I sympathize most with the dirty mistress. She like seemed to have it pretty together. She was like she behaved fairly reasonably and fairly intelligently as the film went along.
Well, I don't think there's any sympathetic characters in this film, but I think we should talk about a little bit kind of what happens we should get into the plot a little bit.
No, I have to tell you what I thought was sympathetic.
The landlord.
Well, something I thought was interesting when I was watching this movie is my sympathies kind of shifted like back and forth. Like I was, as a moral person, I was rooting against the husband and for the woman, but in the scenes where she was like about to catch him, I was rooting for him. And then the scenes where he was out of the house and she was trying to put the pieces together, I was rooting for her. It was kind of like The Departed.
It was actually kind of gripping to me, and I think I felt similarly. I wouldn't say I was rooting for either of them, but I was curious to see how the scene would play out. I did get a little bit involved in the drama, even though it was pretty poorly acted. These are some of the most lackluster performances I've seen in a movie in a long time.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I
felt
did.
invested.
I appreciated the fact. I mean, I think it's tough. It's tough to write a book with no sympathetic characters. It's tough to make a movie with no sympathetic characters, or to have your sympathies like change on a whim. And you know, I think this movie actually did do that, because there's not any one protagonist that you're rooting for, unlike many of the other movies that we've seen so far. Actually.
Well, I will say, I mean, we've left out perhaps the most important character, Baron the dog. I found to be very sympathetic.
Oh, the hero of the film.
Without question. Why don't we back up a little bit and start back at the beginning? So we had this exploitation montage at the beginning of cameras. Couple moves into a new house. They have a dinner party with two of their friends that really sets up their characters. And there is some absolutely disgusting dialogue between our main quote-unquote protagonist and his best friend. Patrick has something to say.
I have a quote. I wrote down my favorite line.
I've got a couple as well.
From this entire movie. The like douchey best friend says to...
Who looks like PewDiePie. Do you know what I'm talking about? He's like the epitome, the textbook definition of douche.
So he and his wife, or girlfriend, I think they're married. He has a wife, He and his wife are standing on the doorstep of this couple's house, like waiting to come in. They've rung the doorbell. They're waiting to come in for the dinner party. And... he's brought a bottle of wine. That's right. That's the context for all this, because she's pregnant. So the wife is like, you brought a bottle of wine to a pregnant woman's house. And he says, we got to go to Crate and Barrel every time somebody moves into a house. Give me a fucking break.
Okay, which was, first of all, relatable. I was like...
Relatable. I mean, super douchey line, but I laughed. I think I laughed out loud when that happened.
I was like, fun, true, and funny.
Yeah.
That's what I thought about that line.
Yeah. Anyways, you have lines as well, Stephen?
Not as many as I thought. I mean, basically, the summary of the conversation. So the two parties separate. The two women stay. This is how we got thinking about the Bechdel test. The two women stay inside and talk about the men, and the men go outside and talk about the girls, and they sip their beers. And we discover that our male protagonist is very unhappy in his relationship. He says his wife is basically just a glorified roommate. And we're maybe 15 to 20 minutes into the movie at this point, and the horror has really yet to have been set up. I don't even know if we've seen any of the... I think maybe during the dinner party we see POV from the landlord's cameras, do we?
Yeah, and we know that their house is bugged because we see the guy whose name is Gerald. Did you know that?
Yeah, I did know that.
Yeah, Gerald is the name of the guy, and we see him at the hardware store buying the surveillance equipment and working on the thing and everything.
Which also yields a laugh line for me too, because the hardware store clerk is like, "You seem like a reasonable guy,"
and he's like non-verbal.
and he's just like standing there, mouth breathing.
Like,
yeah, he's like an ape from Planet of the Apes.
But we know the house is videotaped because the opening of the movie is the landlord Gerald putting these cameras in all these crazy places in the house. So we kind of know that going in. And at this dinner party, I think there are some POVs from the cameras in the house, and he's just like at home watching, waiting for something to happen.
So they're trying to ratchet up suspense, but through if you're listening to this and you're like, well, what's the feeling of this movie? Where's the horror come from? I guess really what you're watching in this movie is people going about their mundane lives and dealing with relationship drama, and we're just supposed to be creeped out that there's someone watching them. And
it's kind of going for like a potboiler thing where there really isn't much horror for a long time other than just these people kind of carrying on their mundane and sordid sort of lives as Gerald is just watching them.
And like Gerald is, he's creepy because he's just kind of physically gross and he smells bad apparently, and it's like, okay, so there's an ugly guy who smells bad and he's watching you, all right, but I don't know, so is being watched really that scary?
No, that's what I was gonna say. Like, honestly, I kind of thought to myself, I mean, this is gonna sound bad, but I thought to myself in this movie, like, aside from the fact that, spoiler alert, like, bad things happen, like, having cameras in your house isn't the end of the world, like, whatever.
It's not the end of the world.
It doesn't feel like there's a physical threat. They're also
that creepy.
Well, it's one of the reasons this doesn't work for me for so long in the film is that the characters themselves are unaware that they're being surveilled the entire time. We're the only ones who know, and the director spends so much time developing the relationships or the fracture in the relationship that the cameras become integrated just into the cinematography of the film. Often there will just be dramatic scenes where we switch to one of the cameras in the corner of the room.
Possibly a cost-saving measure.
Maybe.
Because the movie shot conventionally, but I don't know what percentage I would say, but a fair amount of the percentage of the running time is shot from the point of view of these cameras while stuff's playing out.
Yeah, probably like 10-20%.
Just enough where they could probably cut 10 or 20% of their expensive camera setups and use, their phones as cameras and save some scratch so that they could pay this Gerald actor.
Well, while we've got this potboiler situation going on, the director and the writer, the filmmakers will say, we'll just put it under one umbrella, don't make any effort to develop the landlord at all. We have no idea what his motivation is, how he wound up as insane as he is. His body, I mean, there's a scene where they're out of the house and he gets in the pool and he has this really fascinating physique. He looks like a former bodybuilder who still has a lot of lean muscle. He's got very thin arms and bony shoulders. Like, there's a story there, and I want to know it.
Yeah,
and muscular.
We never get that.
I would say muscular arms.
But the movie,
I was just shocked at like how ripped his like shoulders look. Because I mean, he's like a big, hulking, like kind of fat guy, and so like when you first see like more of his body, you're like, oh wait, this guy is like worked out.
Well, yeah, they make him out to be a completely disgusting slob with no inclination towards physical fitness, but then he's actually a bodybuilder.
Yeah.
So,
well, let's talk about that scene. They're both out of the house. I believe this is when they make a pilgrimage, the couple does, our protagonists, to buy an expensive rocking chair 2 hours away.
Yes.
So the landlord shows up to install more cameras. I don't know if he's trying to hit 13, if we're beyond 13 at this point. He installs more cameras, including one in the pool, after he's seen some of the affair that's going on with the husband and this couple. And he, at one point, swims in the pool. He rubs the girl's toothbrush all over his face.
Oh, yeah.
It's just low rent gross out. And
exactly,
like,
one of the cheapest gross outs you can possibly imagine, I think.
But I appreciate, I forget the actor's name, but I appreciate his performance in that scene, like the way he pulls the toothbrush out and like stares at it and just like kind of like weirdly drags it across his lips.
As if
it's
he's
like,
never seen a toothbrush before.
I mean, it's inspired the way he performs that. Like it's the weirdness is inspired.
I did appreciate how he was like creepy in sort of unique ways, because like you think, okay, you finally have access to this house that you've been watching ladies in here, like you think, okay, you're gonna go straight to the underwear drawer, you know, or whatever, and like he doesn't. He kind of just like creeps around and touches things that the women have touched and rubs the toothbrush on his face, and I kind of appreciated that as like a new take on creepy.
He does wind up in the underwear drawer.
He does.
Yes, sir.
I think
it's not his first stop.
He pulls the underwear off of the clothesline.
He takes the underwear off the clothesline.
Oh, right.
Because the wife goes out later and like there's just clothespins and something missing, and she's like, huh, shrugs her shoulders and walks off. Like,
okay, the rocking chair though. You brought the rocking chair.
She comes back with the rocking chair. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I know.
This is where my sympathy shifted. Why don't you go ahead and tell it, because you brought it up.
Oh, so yeah, I mean, they go on. I don't know how long it is, but it's a trip long enough.
It's a 2-hour drive.
They say it's a 2-hour drive. They go on a long ass drive, long enough for the landlord to come over, dick around, install a bunch more hidden cameras while they're buying this antique rocking chair. And they come back, they set it down in the nursery or whatever, and it's this bare looking. I mean, it's not a comfortable looking rocking chair. And she sits down and is like, he's like, how is it? And she's like, it's not very comfortable. And it's like, you went that far and you didn't test out the fucking chair.
It's just another. At that point, they're trying to make us relate to the scruffy, terrible husband and be like, okay, this wife is just a miserable person.
That's interesting. I guess I didn't realize that. It just didn't make any sense to me.
It's a very misogynistic approach.
It's a very misogynistic, and the movie crucifies her for just like doing things like wanting to paint the bedroom and I think this writer director might. I mean, hey, strong accusation to make, having not met the guy. Maybe it's just a movie that didn't work. That's me being nice, but he's got some. I think he might have some issues with women.
Yeah, what do you think, Elizabeth? How did you feel about the wife in this movie and the way she was portrayed? I mean, especially the scene that we just discussed.
Well, preface to this comment, I am a woman.
What?
On this podcast. I think there's, I mean, again, I don't know what to say. I mean, I am a woman. I love women, whatever. I'm not a woman hater. I think there's a lot of women like that.
Yeah.
So I think I don't think that he portrayed that in the most artful way, and I don't know if this is perhaps the time to portray women in that manner in this day and age, but like there are a lot of pregnant women who are extremely self-centered, who would like force their husbands to go for 2 hours to get an antique rocking chair and then decide it wasn't comfortable. Like I literally know women like that personally. So if you want to choose to portray women like that, I mean, it's not like he's he's not off the mark.
Maybe, I don't know, maybe it just felt so weird because she doesn't seem like an unpleasant person most of the time, and so it's like, I guess maybe we don't feel offended when she wants to repaint the bedroom or whatever. Maybe she had been more of a menace throughout the movie.
She seemed very I'm not sympathetic to the husband, but she seemed very unpleasant to me. She seemed very demanding, very particular, very my way or the highway. So I kind of felt like, I wouldn't want to fucking come in there for you to paint. Like, you got to hang a picture. God damn, you've asked me to hang this picture like 15 times. No, I don't want to get up either. You know,
I thought she seemed perfectly
me?
Nice.
Yeah.
I thought she seemed like a nice girl. Just they did not seem suited for each other.
Yeah,
they seemed to have different interests.
I mean, I don't think the director is a misogynist.
And,
well, that's what I'm asking.
So you hated them both equally, I think.
Yeah, I hated them both
Okay.
equally. I thought they were both unsympathetic characters, and there's plenty of people like them in the world today.
Yeah,
totally
that's
agree.
true. And there's probably a lot of people like Gerald in the world today.
So let's move the plot
Yeah,
forward.
can we get to like the big like kind of action pivot here?
Well, it's a slow burn because there's plenty of scenes where like they're gone and Gerald enters the house to put in more cameras and like it's like a close call. Like, are they going to get back before he leaves? And meanwhile, the husband is having sex.
At which point we're rooting for Gerald again, talking about sympathies changing.
Kind of. We're kind of like
Gerald
I
in
was
the
kind of
house.
like
I was never rooting for Gerald.
I want to
go
see
on record
everybody
as
but
saying I was
Baron
never
die at this
rooting.
point in
Yeah,
the
I'm
movie.
kind of like let's bust it out. So Gerald's coming in there. He's putting in more cameras. Sometimes the husband is having sex with the assistant in the house while the wife is gone. Sometimes the assistant is trying to get into the house as the wife's gone. I think it comes to a climax. It sort of builds up because
Don't forget about the owner's closet.
That's what I was going to bring up. So
I'm sorry, yes,
I was going
please.
to tie this into when they're setting up the house. At one point, she needs help hanging a picture of some fucking thing. I don't
course.
care. And so she needs a hammer and nails. She comes to him, and he gets very upset and says, like, what now? This has to happen now. And he storms off. He says we have a hammer and nails in a box somewhere. But for some reason, he goes to a closet that they've never been in before.
Well,
no,
it's set up. It's set up in like the opening scenes of the movie. Gerald is like giving them a tour of the house, and one of the like 3 words he manages to mouth breathe is the owner's closet. There's a creepy closet, which is one of many reasons that I would never move into this fucking house. Like creepy landlord, weird owner's closet.
Yeah,
like
of
just
course.
there are a
But
lot
then-
of signs
But
here.
then you don't have
and he
a
smells
movie.
like, decaying mayonnaise or whatever
Mayonnaise.
she
But
says.
then
Yeah.
you don't have a movie, and that's totally within bounds for movies like this. You always have the one place that's like Get Out, a fine film. There's like, we got
perfect film.
we got black mold in the basement. We don't go down there. And like the first scene, you're like, okay, there's
also
something
this
creepy
is in the
basement.
Bay
I love it.
Area where housing is hard to come by. So you know what? Owner's closet, people will just fucking whatever.
I didn't even realize that.
There is a line where they're like, it's a little weird, but at this price, in this neighborhood, in this economy, in this zip code.
And they go get the rocking chair. They're like, fuck, we got to drive down to Santa Barbara today. Anyway.
Well, so there's no. My problem is there's no shot of him like rooting through a box and be like, "Oh, we don't have a hammer. I guess we have to go in the owner's closet." He goes straight to this closet. He has
Actually,
no,
no,
idea
it's
what's
not
down
that
there.
their hammer's lost. Yeah, it's he's like, maybe there's one in the owner's closet.
And that's just easier to find, I guess. He says they have one. We're
And he's
getting
pissed,
bogged down.
so he
He's
like
pissed,
breaks into the owner's closet.
busts the door open. What does he see down there? Anybody?
It cuts away. You never see what he sees down there.
He
What-
pushes
what-
out. He like walks halfway down.
No,
the
he
stairs
goes
and then
all the
comes-
way down. He goes all the way down. He's down there for a minute, but we never follow. We don't follow him down there. He probably saw all the torture room. He probably saw the torture room.
Listen, you
Okay,
guys,
but
there's
all right.
nothing
Yeah,
down
there's
there.
nothing. Yeah,
That
she's
doesn't
right.
exist.
There's no
Nothing down
lady
there.
down there.
Yeah,
What
yeah,
it is
Tort's
there's
right.
there's
just some
there's a
insulation.
hot water heater and like an area where you could chain up a woman.
But who would do that?
But who would fucking do that?
Gerald.
And who would think that's
So
a
he's
Poor
like,
guy.
yeah, there's nothing down here. It's a basement. It's not an
Right.
owner's closet, but like whatever. And he comes back up and she's like, oh my god, I dropped a cup. And he's like, oh.
All right. Well, while we're still on the slow boil, if you can call it that, part of this movie, I want to mention that it reminded me a little bit of kind of the same kind of stuff, but done better in an old movie you might remember called 1 Hour Photo,
Oh, hell yeah.
starring Robin Williams.
I haven't seen it.
You haven't seen it?
Not
Okay.
in a long time, but I remember liking it.
I think it was like 1999 or 2000, something like that. And Robin Williams is the 1 Hour Photo
Developer.
technician, whatever, at the Walgreens or whatever, and he like basically falls in love with like a family because he's a lonely guy. He's like Gerald, but not like a cartoon character. He's like your run of the mill, like lonely, socially weird guy, and he watches the family through their photos, and then like it escalates, and he ends up breaking into their house and basically pulling a Gerald and looking at all their stuff and
forcing them to have sex in front of him at one point.
At one
to
point
live out
that
his
happens
fantasy.
late on,
Yeah.
and there's an affair going on in that movie too. That's why he does it.
Didn't remember that. It's
Yeah,
been a
so
long
this
time.
is just actually a gritty reboot of 1 Hour Photo starring Robin Williams.
Who would have thought?
I want to watch that now.
Yeah, you definitely
I'm
should watch it.
curious.
In fact, you know what? If you're looking for a recommendation, forget about 13 cameras. Watch 1 Hour Photo. Same movie, much better.
Hey, you're skipping to your.
And
You're
thanks
skipping
for
ahead.
being here today, everybody.
No, I'm not skipping that.
And that's our cast.
That's
There's-
clarified.
You can
There's
watch
more
both.
to discuss.
There's
So-
more to discuss. So
So,
that's the
okay,
slow
so what? Okay, come on, guys. So what happens when? Yeah.
Yeah, so
Please,
there's
Elizabeth.
a few. Again, this movie is a slow burn. There's a few creepy hints. They discover the owner's closet. It turns out to be a basement. Whatever. Most of the tension comes from the fact that the husband is having an affair with his assistant, and the
Yes.
assistant continues to threaten to come to the house and like calls him repeatedly at 2 a.m., then somehow gets the wife's phone number and starts calling her. And much of the tension comes from the fact that she is going to show up at the house or like expose him, and you're kind of wondering if that's going to happen.
There's some good scenes.
Then it does. I mean, we're jumping ahead quite a bit, but there's...
I mean, I don't think there's that much to say.
That goes on for quite a while. I don't think there's much to say about it. She does show up at the house because they need to have a booster installed for their Wi-Fi or whatever the fuck. I never...
Yeah, they don't have... Of course, with any horror movie, you have to have a way that there's no cell signal.
Right. They don't have a cell service
and at this place, it's that there's no cell service at the house. You have to be in the backyard to get cell service. So... inexplicably, the wife is like, can you have your assistant come give us a booster? Which, you know, whatever. I don't know the ins and outs of, like, the Bay Area.
Oh, that's why you
crowd.
thought he worked at the Verizon store.
Yeah.
I think he works at a cell phone company. So, so he's like, yeah, I'll do it, but he doesn't want to have the assistant come because he's having an affair with her, but... eventually she shows up at the house.
I think you're wrong. He doesn't know that the assistant is the one who comes to do it. The wife, he never takes care of it, so the wife calls on her own.
Yeah.
And someone comes over, and then he comes home and finds out that it's the assistant. He has no idea why she's in his house.
Right. So the assistant who he's been sleeping with comes over, and he comes home and finds the two women together in the kitchen.
Which begs the question, why does the wife call the assistant? Why is that like the go-to?
Right.
She's like, I need the Wi-Fi installed. Maybe because he works at the Verizon store, but that's never clarified in the movie. So it's puzzling.
Very contrived. I mean, it felt like they just spent a minimal amount of time setting up that the reason for the assistant being there, because for this shitty of a script, that had to happen. It doesn't make any sense, but
and I do want to still put in a good word for the assistant because She does call everybody's phones a lot, but I was struck by how much, like, I didn't hate the assistant. She's not like Glenn Close in Fatal Attraction or something. She's not crazy. Like, her motivations are like fairly solid. Like, she's fairly reasonable. She's like, quit being a dick, and then she starts getting a little
tell your wife,
but it's still not like boil your bunny crazy.
Well, actually, there's an important scene kind of early on where she's hanging out with the husband, and they basically like say that they're in love with each other.
Yeah,
and he's like, you're my true love, not my wife. I'm having a baby. So, they tried.
Yeah. Okay, so anyway, sorry.
Well, very soon after that, this finally becomes a horror movie. Can anybody explain exactly why? Because I don't remember exactly where it shifted. It's very late in the film, maybe last 15 minutes. All of the elements come in.
Oh, no.
No. Before that, you are forgetting a large section of this movie.
Yeah. We all watched this too long
right.
ago.
Okay, yeah, you're right.
Well,
So
it is towards the end because
it does take a long while for this to happen.
What happens is the assistant has been calling, and she's like, "I'm coming over. I'm done with the."
She basically
lies.
Goes psycho.
She turns
into Glenn Close.
And the husband is like, "Fuck, we have to get out of the house." So he tells his wife, "Let's go out to dinner. Let's go out to dinner. Let's go out to dinner."
Oh yeah.
So he drags her out to dinner. While they're out to dinner, indeed, the assistant shows up at the house and, goes inside. And Gerald, the landlord, has been watching on the cameras, and this is his moment. And he goes in.
And you kind of think, again, they don't develop Gerald at all.
Right,
so I can only,
yeah.
I treat it as an ad lib. I can only defer to what I learned from 1 Hour Photo about that character's motivations. Because I feel like Gerald has some kind of affinity and investment in what's going on in the household, and that, like, he's not comfortable with the cheating that's going on.
No, but you thought wrong, dude.
And he's not comfortable with the assistant coming to the house about to ruin domestic tranquility.
But he jerks off to the assistant. And at this point, he's already set up a torture chamber in the basement that has the most improbable and amazing soundproofing I've ever imagined.
It's fine. Whatever.
It's
we
ridiculous.
need that right now for the room we're doing this podcast.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He just puts up some three random pieces of foam on the door, and he has music playing in the basement to test it out. And when he shuts the door, you can hear nothing.
Yeah.
So this woman gets trapped in the basement of this house while the couple is still living there.
She's wearing a leash.
She's screaming, crying. They can't hear anything. No matter where they are in the house, not a single utterance from her.
Which Gerald maybe should leave the field of property management and go into
we should hire him.
Energy efficiency consulting.
Well, look, this would have been a good movie if Gerald was just an insistent affair ender. It was just here to trap the lady.
He was burned by his ex.
Yeah,
and,
no,
like,
but
he's
if
on a
he was
quest
like,
to-
I'm going to save this marriage, I will like trap this woman in a basement and you guys will repair your marriage. See, that would have been an interesting take. Instead, it turns out he's just a fucking creep and he like...
Well, but what... but the whole question is, I mean, you're exactly right. Like, what is his motivation? Like, what is he...
Right.
Why is he trapping her in the basement?
He just
He
likes
goes,
ladies.
after this point, he goes down to feed her occasionally.
He
He
likes
doesn't
them.
do anything sexual with her. And he just...
Well...
And now he can no longer...
No,
We'll
he
talk
doesn't.
about that in a
Well,
moment. No, we'll
eventually.
talk about that in a
I
moment.
guess you're right. But yeah,
I have a theory,
Okay.
which is that once the affair is exposed, there's no sex going on in that house, and he is sexually frustrated and decides to take action. He has nothing left to watch anymore, so he decides to create his own entertainment.
I like that.
I think that makes
theory.
sense. It is not explicitly stated in the movie, but that's
No.
the way the chain of events unfolds.
Yeah, this movie, it leaves enough questions that you can ad-lib a little bit and kind of, write your own ending.
Choose your
Write
own adventure.
Yeah.
Choose your own...
Choose your own
camera.
motivations and, whatever.
I mean, suffice it to say, it's never explained what
Well,
the
but
fuck
anyway,
his
so-
intentions
so
are, or
he-
what his motivation is.
He traps the assistant in the basement, and the couple comes home, and he's still watching them on the cameras. But someone needs to remind me what motivates him to come back after he has the assistant in the basement. Like, what? Because there's like the climactic
the assistant
scene.
breaks out.
Oh, and he has to go get her.
Yeah. So
That's
and
right.
at that point, spoiler alert: the husband's been kicked out of the house because the affair's been exposed. So our emotional investment in this movie is done at that point. Kind of, we're like, the affair's been exposed. Now what? Answer is Gerald's just going to show up and wipe everything up in 10 minutes.
Which is exactly what happens. He kills everyone, and that's it.
Spoiler
End of
alert!
scene.
Spoiler alert!
Hey, man, let's hash it out a little bit. It's kind of an exciting scene. I mean...
Well, the cad, who we all grew to hate exponentially more of the film, I believe is the first to die. Am I right?
Yeah.
Yep.
gets
because he's
beaten
sleeping
with
on
a
the
hammer.
couch, and
The
so
cad.
yeah, so he's sleeping on the couch, and Gerald comes in and beats him with a baseball bat. So he's done.
And
Brutally.
it was kind of brutal. What was brutal to me about it was that the wife overhears it, and that's a horrifying thing. To hear your husband or wife being beaten to death, and you're powerless to do anything. And it happens in real life.
And it is actually a nicely done scene because it's not a bloody scene. Sorry, that was a laugh line, and
Can you relate, Chris?
I know. I mean, it hasn't happened to me, but
It's
it
only
does.
a matter of
it does
time.
happen where there's like
It is an effective scene though because you don't see any blood. It's one of those scenes where it's very focused on just Gerald just savagely
hammer, right?
beating.
It is a hammer, right.
Yeah, and it's effective. I'll give
yeah,
it
because
that.
the husband has
Yeah.
a baseball bat.
But before he gets
baseball bat trumps or hammer trumps baseball bat.
Yeah.
well, and it is exciting or not exciting. Well, it's exciting, but that's not what we're going for.
It's more exciting than anything else in the movie. I mean, this is. But here's the thing, though. It's exciting. It's horrific. But again, none of the horror in this supposed horror movie comes from the premise, which is that the 13 cameras. He's watching you on 13 cameras.
I mean, I disagree. I think that depends on your perception of whether being surveilled is creepy or not. That creeps me out.
It is, but you know what? I don't know. In this, I don't know why this is, but for me, knowing that you're being surveilled is terrifying. Not knowing you're being surveilled is fine
Because you don't know.
Yeah,
you have no feelings about
but then
it.
this movie raises the possibility that you could be Gerald could be watching all of us right now.
who cares?
That's what this movie does.
I don't care.
I mean,
Who's
I
watching
don't.
me?
I'm not saying it's horrifying, but I'm saying it creeps me a little bit.
Dude, this is like the Patriot Act. I was like,
You think this is a message movie? You think this is a political film?
I think it's a political film because when the Patriot Act came out, I was like, tap my phone. I have nothing to hide.
Yeah.
And that's what I say about this movie. Survey my house. I have
Then
nothing
you
to
realize you have something to hide.
But then you realize you have something to hide after the government calls you and you're like, what's that conversation you were just having? Anyway.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know, just not because the movie, one of the most interesting parts of the movie for me is when she actually starts to realize she's being surveilled. And that's tense because once you realize you're being surveilled, you're like a prisoner in your own home, and that's a bad situation to be in. If you're just taking a shower and some guy's watching you, I mean, what you don't know can't hurt you.
Yeah.
It's
well,
like,
it can, because she doesn't know, and then it still comes back to her.
But there's I've seen there's other movies,
Literally.
riveting scenes.
Yeah.
Okay, well, she doesn't die.
Well,
What, the wife?
All right.
Yeah.
I thought she was murdered as well.
No.
Well, I guess you could say it's ambiguous, but I don't think...
No, it's not ambiguous.
You don't see for a fact that she's alive, but it's heavily implied
I thought
that she's
she
alive.
definitely
I'm
died.
pretty sure
She
she's dead.
births the fucking baby. Where did you guys think he got that baby?
She was like 13 months pregnant. That baby was ready to pop at any moment.
But right before...
I'm
Do you think he was like, hold on, and he let her give birth and then kill her?
So
I think he just fucking cut the baby out of her after he killed her.
Well, he's got a woman held captive at the end of the movie.
And that's her. That's her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I 100% believe that's her.
That's her.
I can see where it's like, well, we didn't see if it was her, so maybe it's not her.
That's her.
That's your
Oh, no,
prerogative.
that's right. It is her.
That's your prerogative.
For a minute, I thought he brutally murdered her.
Maybe
That's
you
right.
do see her.
We need to watch these movies closer to doing the podcast.
Well, no. I think where I was confused is he does beat her, right? Like,
Yeah,
he
it's a
doesn't-
savage scene where I'm like, oh shit, he just killed the pregnant
And
woman.
then abrupt cut to one
That
of the
was
most
the feeling I
flippant
had.
endings of any movie I've ever seen. I don't know if we want to get to it yet. Anything else to discuss?
I got nothing else to say.
Well, I want to just give a quick summary for our listeners. So he kills the husband who's been sleeping on the couch. Actually, it's kind of a not touching scene, but the mistress and the wife are locked together in the bathroom because they're tried to lock themselves in, and they kind of teamed up, and they're trying to call 911.
There's
but
not really any bad blood between them.
No, there's not bad blood. They're trying to survive. I mean, they're like, fuck it. We both slept with a douche. Whatever.
It's not worth me being chained up in the
it's not
basement
worth
for a
like
week
either
or-
of us dying. And they're trying to call 911, but of course there's no cell service in the house.
And
So
911 would take 40 minutes to get there.
to me, this was a classic line classic situation where they're like, we have to get out the bathroom window, and the pregnant woman's like, I can't fit, and so the mistress is like, I'll go, and so she jumps out the window and tries to go out to the backyard where they have cell service to call 911, but as so often happens in horror movies, like fumbles with her phone for 10 minutes and like can't dial 3 numbers and ends up getting dunzoed.
She gets drowned in the pool. Drowned in the pool, which you see from the normal camera perspective, you see it from the surveillance camera perspective, and you also see it from the perspective of the surveillance camera that's inside the pool.
Yeah.
So
you get a lot of views.
This guy spares no expense.
So, I mean, then it's kind of, there's this scene where 2 policemen come into the house because Gerald, the landlord, has been like, haven't heard from my tenants in 7 weeks.
That was a good scene. I like that scene.
I did too. And someone wanted to describe this instead of me. I've been talking for a while.
Well, he's cleaned up the mess. There's nothing there. Nothing.
Yeah,
to
a couple
indicate that anything
cops
was
show up, and you think maybe they're responding, and or they're touring the house. Gerald's giving them the tour. He's like, "Yeah, haven't heard. 4 weeks, no rent, hungry," and the cops are walking. And the cops are walking around, and they're like, huh, and you're just hoping. You're hoping that the cops
Like,
are going to
let
see
there be a
something.
spot of blood.
Let there be a piece of hair. Let there be something not right. And then the guy's like, "Oh, hold on, Gerald. We got to check the fucking owner's closet." And you're like, "Oh, this is it." No, everything looks good. Crazy yuppies. What can you do?
And so he
and they
gets up.
notice a smell in the basement. They're like, oh, it smells like dead people down here.
Let's get out of here.
And he's like,
let's get out of here.
And he's like, animals. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the final scene is of Gerald throwing a fast food burger to an anonymous woman that he has chained up in his own apartment.
In a new
Yeah,
house.
again, for reasons unknown. Yeah, he's got like a townhouse now. There's like neighbors who are like, "Hey, Gerald, come by and fix my sink tomorrow." And he's like, "Tomorrow."
But it's a new house that he's renting out, though. We should clarify.
He's
it's
also-
not like his
oh,
house,
I-
right?
I thought it was like
matter.
an
I thought it
apartment
was his
complex.
apartment.
I can't. Well, his cameras aren't there, and I can't imagine he would leave them for very long because he likes his 13 cameras.
Seemed like the girl who was asking him to come fix the whatever was like living above the new basement that he has someone chained up in.
Can I just go on record and say I think I would like this movie better if it were just titled Cameras?
Chris has some issues with the number.
Yeah, you guys both have issues with the number. Do we want to get to this before we get to the ending?
It's not worth talking about. It's a
about.
Ridiculous title. Why is 13?
Because it's an unlucky number.
Okay, wait. Can I tell you
if
guys
it had been 12
original
cameras, everybody would have been fine.
Everyone would have been fine having 12 cameras in their house. 13, you've crossed the line.
There's an alternate title for the film.
Do y'all know the original title?
Yeah.
Slumlord. That was the original title. It made the festival circuits under the title Slumlord, and then they retitled it 13.
Because it doesn't take place in a slum.
It's not a slum. It's like
pretty upscale.
Seriously.
Not upscale, but you know.
Yeah, it's upscale.
Upper middle class.
Yeah.
Okay, so anyways, there's a new house that he either lives in or doesn't, and then whoever was summarizing can continue to summarize, because I always forget.
Please, because we're up to the final.
Well, I
moments
mean, I
here.
think the final scene is both amusing and horrifying, because he has this woman chained up, and you at least I think I presume this, and Chris apparently presumed this. Chris, you
It's
just
the
made a
woman.
horrific
you guys are
face
right.
at
You
my
guys are
margarita.
No, it's the wife. It's the wife.
Yeah,
I just
it's
don't
totally
wanna-
agree.
It's
So-
explicitly
So
shown,
he has
I
the
think.
wife chained up in this new place, and she's screaming, and he says something to her, and then the camera follows him. The one camera follows him out to his car. He gets in the driver's seat of his truck, and then there's this sort of cry, and it pans over to a young baby.
Yeah, it's so he's gonna
He's
parent
got a
the
baby, and he's like, "Quiet down, Junior."
Which honestly, based on what we've seen, he might be a better parent than.
So anyway, he's the what do you call it? The clincher is that the woman had the baby and he's raising it.
Which, who cares? I mean, I don't know. Again, it just kind of goes back to like, well, Gerald's gross. And he's a killer. I mean, then, yeah, by the end of the movie, you find out he's a killer. You're definitely not rooting for him. But it's like, Gerald is gross. The movie hangs a lot of shit on, well, Gerald's gross. And, whatever.
But that final line is so weirdly placed, because there's literally almost no humor that's actually cast as humor up until that point in the movie. And that seems like something you're supposed to be like, kind of
it's
snicker
tone
at.
deaf. And I'm still thinking about the woman. And you know what? I'm still thinking about the woman because, like, it wasn't that long ago that, like, there have been women who have been held in houses for months, years.
Yeah.
And it's like, so that is a horrifying thing. But again, none of the horror in this movie comes from the alleged 13 cameras.
And it winds up seeming like that's because the movie lacks for any kind of a point or any kind of a clear, like, thesis statement so much that by the time you get to that final moment and it ends on that moment, it almost seems like the world's longest wind-up to the world's shittiest punchline. It almost seems like that joke is the point of the whole 90 minutes you just watched.
What if Gerald took your baby? It's like, it seems
Quiet
like...
down, Junior, and the curtain...
Quiet down, Junior. And that's not even like... Couldn't they have worked in a better pun or something?
Yeah. Like, if that's your punchline, if that's the point, like, make it a better punchline.
It is so totally different from everything else in the film. It was embarrassing for me to watch. I mean, to think that, like, they actually thought this was funny, but also it's that trope that,
or edgy, like,
yeah, that's probably a better word for what they would have thought. I mean, especially with the kind of music they end the film with, sort of like brash alternative rock. A song called Amphetamine as well, which like seemed to have nothing to do with the movie. This guy's singing about being high on amphetamine. Maybe that's Gerald's motive. He's a drug addict, and we never knew.
Just give me something. Just give me something to pretend is a motive.
Yeah, because there's very little music in the whole movie. I think there are a few.
There's that stock, the stock, like, suspense, wind-up kind of music.
Yeah, and then it's like, quiet down, Junior, and it's like...
Well, it feels like it's setting up for a sequel, which is a trope that I'm so sick of at this point.
There's a sequel.
Decades.
There is a sequel coming. I don't know if you saw this.
Are you serious?
There's
14
a
cameras.
sequel in development called 14 Cameras.
No fucking way.
Chris, are you shitting us?
Did you? I thought you knew. I thought that's why you said it. No, literally. There's a sequel planned, and it's going to be called 14 Cameras. Because why not?
Still with Gerald?
I'm
hope so.
I'm sure they would not. Gerald. So here's the
He's
thing.
the new Tobin Bell.
Gerald, like, the writing of this movie put aside, I think there is some potential in the Gerald character. He was visually interesting. I was intrigued. I want to know more about him.
He gives a great performance. I mean, I saw a picture of him online, and I was like, oh, wait, that's the same dude.
There's nothing wrong with Gerald in this movie that couldn't be fixed with how they treat Gerald in a second movie if they do a better job.
Dude, maybe he'll turn
Agree, Steve?
Maybe he'll turn into, like, post First Nightmare on Elm Street Freddy, where he's just going to, like, joke and make puns constantly.
Maybe. I don't know. But, you know what, briefly, my final real thought on this movie is I did have a nightmare about this movie. So if that counts for something in the horror movie universe.
Tell us.
Tell us.
What was the nightmare?
I was in I don't know if it was a home or an office.
Were you the baby? Were you in the car seat in Gerald's
No,
car?
but
who
Gerald,
were you?
it was basically the ending of the movie where, like, I knew Gerald was on the premises and I was trying to escape the premises and avoid Gerald, and I knew that, like, because the one attribute, he doesn't have any character, but he does physical attributes. He seems to be very strong and dangerous at close range with a variety of instruments. So I was like, he could be around this corner with a hammer. I need to stay really wide of the hammer if I want to run by this corner.
Has anyone had who has had the landlord that's closest to Gerald? Has anyone had a landlord that, like, you think could have been a Gerald?
All my landlords have been fucking sweethearts.
Okay, all right. So not you, Steve.
The closest experience I had was not a landlord, but a neighbor. Do you remember Farmer Dave?
Oh,
when I
yeah.
lived out in the country.
Yeah, Farmer
neighbor
Dave.
who paid very close attention to even the lighting choices that I made in my house when he had never been inside of it. Another story for another time.
LED saves money.
Elizabeth, have you ever had a Gerald as a landlord?
No, I mean, my landlord right now is like a husband and wife team who are lovely, and the landlord before that was literally an 89-year-old woman from Alabama. So, no Geralds. Although, hey, actually, who knows if 89-year-old women can do a lot. So...
Patrick, did you have a Gerald landlord in your past?
I did have a landlord who had a creepy basement that backed up one time, and he accused me of flushing tampons down the toilet and causing the flood in the basement. That was pretty close to Gerald, but we had a much closer...
I've never heard that story.
Yeah, me neither.
That happened. But we had an even closer to 13 cameras experience recently when we rented an Airbnb in Detroit. Pretty cool place, beautiful house near the... canals coming off the Detroit River, and Elizabeth rented it specifically because there was a tiki bar in the backyard, and so we went outside. It was kind of late. We'd had a few drinks, and we went to the tiki bar, and Elizabeth was, like, very nicely pouring me a drink, and all of a sudden, this happened almost simultaneously. I don't know which one of us noticed it first.
Well, I was, like, trying to be all flirty and, like, serve Patrick a glass of wine, and I kind of looked at his face, and I saw this sort of register of, like, surprise at his face, and I was like, and I, like, turned around to see what he was looking at, and I noticed that there was a camera positioned right above the tiki bar.
And I, like, tried really hard to mask whatever reaction was on my face, because we were, like, having fun. I didn't want to kill whatever the vibe was, even though that was creepy, and so you kind of gave me this horrified look, and I was like, why are you making that face?
And at first I tried to hide it too, and then finally I was like, okay, there's a camera, like, right there. And we, and we talked about it at the time, and I think this is kind of the question that the movie raises. Is, like, at the time we were like, well, what do we have to hide? Like, if someone is watching us drink some wine and talk to each other in this backyard, like, do we really care? But, like, also...
I think I cared less because it was pointed at the door, not directly at the tiki
Yeah,
bar. It wasn't directly watching us.
It seemed like it could have been a security camera.
I mean, they probably just had a camera on the back door in case of break-ins or something like that, but it still creeped me. Surveillance still creeps me, I think, more than it does the three of you, because I was talking to Big Game. I was like, yeah, let's let him watch us drink some wine, but I was still like, that still weirds me out.
And, I think it did, we had one glass of wine and we went inside. I think maybe we would have had 3 glasses of wine if there wasn't a camera there.
Yeah. So
what can you
surveillance.
say? Surveillance.
It curtails your ability to drink wine. I think we can say that at the bare minimum.
Well, thank God there weren't 13 cameras.
Yeah. Thank God.
Been
I mean,
13.
there may have been.
Yeah. We
don't
only
know.
found one, but who knows how many more there were.
Well hidden. So, do we want to review the movie now? What did we think? What final thoughts? How do we rate it on the view it, cue it, screw it scale, everybody?
Chris,
Who
I'd
wants
like
to
you to
begin?
start. I'm interested.
All right, I'm going to say screw it. For me, this was a movie... The best way I can describe this movie and the problem with it is it was completely devoid of humanity. Like, this movie had no interest in the characters of any of these people and had no sympathy, really, for many of these characters. And it was just like, let's just put some people in the house and some things are going to happen and everyone's going to die. And I don't know, we're supposed to be titillated by them getting killed or watched in the shower, and there was no human element to this movie. You want to see a better movie? 1 hour photo, similar themes. It doesn't get as violent as this movie, but it is very disturbing. But the villain is actually, interesting in that one. Patrick, view it, cue it, or screw it.
I can't really say it any better than you just did. I'm right down there with screw it. Total sort of lack of humanity. I mean, a horror movie should reveal something interesting or insightful about humanity. Or if everybody's just going to be a huge asshole in it who you hate, it should at least be fun to watch everybody die. This wasn't even fun. There was zero entertainment value. The final punchline that was supposed to be fun or funny just felt sort of sick to me.
The deaths felt obligatory, didn't they?
Yeah. Zero redeeming value, really. Other than, I'll put in a good word for the actor. I forget the actor's name who played Gerald. Solid performance. Good job, dude.
With what he had to
Hopefully
work
they
with.
give you something better to do in 14 cameras.
I'm sure he's in something else. We'll have to see. Maybe we'll see it on Netflix.
Otherwise, we try and give these movies the benefit of the doubt. We try and approach them on their own level, but this movie just made me feel kind of terrible for watching it, so screw it.
Elizabeth.
Well, actually, I have one. I had a comment that I wanted to say earlier, and I didn't get the chance. And that is that for a movie where people are getting filmed when they don't know it, it was sort of disappointingly not gratuitous. There's no. I mean, okay,
not enough nudity.
Yeah, there's
some,
no.
Hold
boob.
on a minute. There's some Brian De Palma full frontal nudity in this movie. In the shower scene. There are tits almost pressing against the camera.
Yeah,
I would say
but
full
it's
frontal.
it's not
You don't
full
really
frontal.
see below the belt.
Pretty close.
Well, the movie's trying
Not
to have
Brian
it.
De Palma. De Palma's like, no.
If you're gonna make this kind of movie, then I think you need to show the truth. And that's that there's fucking naked people walking around a house. And I'm not saying that I'm waiting for that, but I felt like it was tried to be some sort of classy movie. And she jumps in the pool and starts to wiggle off her bathing suit, and then the camera cuts.
I mean, there are glimpses of nudity, all done with
glimpses.
body doubles and not the main cast. I noticed in the credits, but it's it seems like it's trying to titillate you.
Right.
I didn't feel like I was supposed to be repulsed.
Kind of like Elizabeth is doing right now with telling us whether she would view it, cue it, or screw it.
No, I
You're
just
just
wanted to get
titillating
that.
us. You're just wiggling
No, I know
off
what
your
you're saying.
I
bottom.
think that was a really good point to
I
make,
just
but-
wanted to comment that
I'm just
for a
joking.
movie that claims to be a surveillance movie, you think you would just see the down and dirty, and you really don't. Which I was kind of just show it.
Or maybe it didn't know how to show it while making it disgusting and not erotic or titillating.
I think they should have made it erotic. Show us this movie from the point of Gerald, and that's a view it.
So the movie as it exists.
Okay, sorry.
Screw
Yeah,
it.
the movie as it exists. I would say for me, cue it. I thought it was. I wasn't bored, and also, again, I think it's fascinating. It's a tough thing to make a movie where there is no sympathetic characters, and also everyone is sympathetic, where you're changing your viewpoints from every time. I didn't hate anyone in that movie, and I also hated everyone, and I think that is harder to do than one might think. So I would say cue it. Whatever. I don't know much about horror, but it was a little bit scary at the end. I thought it was I wasn't bored. Cue it if you want to watch a movie about surveillance, or if you are bored or like pregnant people.
Okay. Steven.
Well, I say if you want to watch a movie about surveillance, you could do a lot better. You could watch The Conversation, Francis Ford Coppola, or Blowout, Brian De Palma. The Lives of Others, many other great movies about surveillance. This is not one of them. This is a movie that is pure exploitation and doesn't even really commit to it. I think Elizabeth brought up a great point. There's a scene where the husband is testing the water in the shower and he has his underwear on. He's home alone. He's also got the door closed. He doesn't know he's being surveilled. Who does that? If I'm going to take a shower, I get in the bathroom, I take my clothes off. Why not? This is a movie that is preying on sort of the prurient desires of the audience to see the lives of these people behind closed doors, and it doesn't pay off in any way. It doesn't really turn into a horror film until the last 20 minutes. The villain is completely underdeveloped. Screw it.
Well said.
Wouldn't bother. So what are we watching next week?
Let's hope it's better than 13 cameras.
Hopefully there's more like asses for you too.
Yeah,
Next
what was that exchange about?
Next-
We can cut this, but I have to know what was going on there. You guys were giving each other a look.
I mean,
Oh, Chris was just like smiling really widely, and I wasn't
No,
sure why, so I was trying to
gazing
figure out
off.
why.
Dude,
I
if
just
there's
gazing
going to be a
off.
movie about surveillance, I want to see a butt. I'm just saying it.
We saw some butts.
Not enough.
I want full frontal.
I want-
Apparently, I didn't get it though. I thought I did.
No, yeah.
Well,
you
gotta-
just dreamed it.
You gotta pay
Well,
your
there are websites for you too.
you gotta pay your actors above like minimum scale to get butts.
All right, Chris, what are we watching next week, dude?
But, well, next week I hope we're watching a movie a little better than 13 cameras. It's 1920 London. Fear Strikes Again. A little period piece, maybe.
How many colons are in that title?
Not enough. So join us again next week, 1920 London. You don't want to miss it. And hey, while you're at it, go online. Check us out on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. It's EHMON or is it AMONcast?
I say Amon.
I say Amon.
Amon.
AMONcast. AMONcast. EHMON and we're on social media at that handle, and you can always subscribe, like, review, whatever on iTunes and all your podcast services. Please review. We hear it helps us a lot. And that's it for the show. I'm Chris Slatt. I produced the thing. Steven Sonoris produced our dank theme song.
I did. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye. Until next time, this is Every Horror Movie on Netflix.